Hello, 5th graders, and welcome to a read-aloud of today's science ebook titled Constellations, as needed for today's science lesson, Unit 5, Lesson 8, called Star Patterns. Now, the opening question asks us, what are constellations, and why do they change during the year? Let's read to find out, pages 4 through 29 in the ebook today. Please note, everybody, that this will be the final science ebook that we read together this year, so I do hope you enjoy it. And since this one is a little shorter than the rest, we will also be looking more closely at the pictures and reading some of the captions under them as well. So with that, let's go ahead and open up the ebook today. Go ahead and go on to page 4 and start here with, what are constellations? At night, tiny lights dot the sky. These lights are stars. On a clear night, you can see thousands of stars. Long ago, people noticed patterns in the stars. They named these patterns and used them to map the sky. These patterns are known as constellations. So as an example of a constellation, most famous constellations were named very long ago. For example, the constellation called Orion the Hunter was named before 4000 BC. So that collection of stars right there, people kind of connected the dots and believed that it took the shape of a hunter in the sky. So Orion the Hunter is an example of a very famous star constellation. Starlight. Most stars are glowing balls of gas that give off light. There are many kinds of stars. They are different in size, mass, brightness, temperature, and color. Stars are spread far apart across space, but from Earth, certain stars appear to be close together. These stars make up constellations. So stars may look small because they're far away, but they are actually huge. Oh yes, very huge and very far away. Our sun is the closest star to Earth, I trust we know. This makes it appear large and bright, and the sun provides Earth with light and heat. So a very special star for us indeed. North or south? Not all constellations can be seen by everyone all the time. The ones you see depend on your location on Earth. People near the North Pole see the constellations in the northern sky. But people near the South Pole see the constellations in the southern sky. People near Earth's equator, in the middle, see the constellations in both skies. So it's worth reminding us, folks, that if we look at the planet Earth, there is an invisible line that runs around the center or the middle, or kind of like the waistband of the Earth, called the equator. The half of the Earth that's above the equator is called the northern hemisphere, so anyone who lives in the northern hemisphere can usually only see constellations in the northern sky. That's like us in the United States, we're in the northern hemisphere. Southern hemisphere, though, which is the part of the Earth that's below the equator, they can only see constellations in the southern sky. So that would be people like in South America or in Australia. However, anyone who happens to live on or near the equator can usually see constellations in both the northern and southern sky. Always around. A few constellations can be seen year-round from certain places on Earth. These are called circumpolar constellations. They are located near either the North Pole or the South Pole. So one example of a circumpolar constellation would be Cassiopeia. That is up in the northern sky near the North Pole. And then there's also this constellation called the Southern Cross. If you connect some of those dots, they make a cross shape. That one is in the southern sky, near the South Pole. Stars and seasons. Many constellations can only be seen during certain seasons, like summer or winter. These are called seasonal constellations. It takes Earth 1 year to orbit the sun. As Earth changes position, seasons change. Different constellations can be seen. That happens because our sun blocks the light of other stars. As Earth moves, stars behind the sun cannot be seen from Earth. So your location on Earth affects when you can see certain seasonal constellations. On Earth's northern half, Cygnus is a summer constellation. On Earth's southern half, it is seen in winter. So that's this constellation here that takes the form of a great bird. We can only see it either in the summer or in the winter, depending on where you live. Move along. Each night, constellations move across the sky. This happens because Earth is always spinning. As Earth orbits the sun, it spins on its axis. It takes 1 day for Earth to make a full spin. This action causes constellations to appear to cross the sky. So constellations across the night sky from east to west. That's a time-lapse picture to give the impression that the stars are moving. But it's really the Earth that's spinning, not the stars. Rise and fall. Earth's axis is tilted. This causes different seasons. It also causes changing views of the night sky. As seasons change, circumpolar constellations appear higher or lower in the sky. So this constellation right here of constellations Draco and Ursa Major, in the summertime, in the northern hemisphere, in the summertime they appear to be higher up in the sky, higher above the horizon. But due to the Earth's tilt, in the wintertime, they appear to be much lower down. Early constellations. People have been studying stars for more than 6,000 years. Long ago, poets, farmers, and scientists saw patterns in the night sky. These patterns were useful to ancient people. They helped them locate certain stars. They were used to tell directions. They also helped people track Earth's seasons. So, sometimes ancient sailors used constellations to direct their boats on the ocean or to help them navigate. Over time, star patterns in the sky became set constellations. They were named for animals, heroes, gods, and tools. So there's a constellation called Hercules, named for the ancient Greek hero, an ancient Greek god. And then there's the constellation Leo, named for the lion of the zodiac. Story time. Many constellations were named for stories called myths. They often explained parts of life or nature that people didn't understand. Long ago, people wondered what stars were. They wanted to know how they came to be in the sky. Many constellations are based on myths that explain this. So the Navajo tribe of the Native Americans have a myth about a great bear. It explains how the stars in the constellation Ursa Major appeared in the sky. So remember, there's not actually a big old bear floating in the sky. It's just the stars. But what people did is they would kind of connect the dots with the stars, and in them they would see those shapes. And around those shapes they would create characters like Ursa Major, the Great Bear, that they would then build stories around. Modern meaning. In the beginning, ancient societies created their own constellations. Many of these patterns crossed over each other, and stars were often in more than one constellation. This made it hard to keep track of them. So ancient societies imagined different patterns in the stars. For example, Greeks saw the constellation Orion as a hunter on the right, but Egyptians saw the same constellation as the god Osiris below. So the two different cultures, the Egyptians and the Greeks, were looking at the same stars, but they saw different shapes and different characters within the stars. Scientists around the world saw a need for a more clear system. So, in the year 1930, the International Astronomical Union, or the IAU, set 88 official constellations. Today's constellations are based on ancient patterns. The IAU drew constellation borders so that every star was mapped. It also made sure that each star belonged to only one constellation. And so the IAU decided on the current borders and names of the constellations. We now have 88 official ones that every culture and every person in the world can keep track of. And final page today, fact check. Groups of related constellations are called families. Often families appear close together in space. So some of the best known star patterns are only part of a constellation, and they are called asterisms. So some of those would include like the North Star, or like the Big Dipper, a well-known asterism. It forms a part of the Great Bear constellation Ursa Major. So if you're familiar with the Big Dipper, those 7 stars right there that kind of form the shape of a big spoon or a big ladle, the Big Dipper, that actually is part of a bigger constellation called Ursa Major, the Great Bear constellation. And lastly, Hydra is the largest constellation. It covers more than 3% of the whole sky. And Hydra is known as the water snake constellation. It is long and thin. And lastly, the zodiac is a famous constellation family, which you may be familiar with. These 12 groups of stars form a line in space, and they are popular fortune-telling tools. So if you happen to know your own zodiac symbol, based on the time of year you were born, you might be Sagittarius, you might be Pisces, you might be Scorpio, Gemini. All of those actually have their own constellation in the night sky. So if you're curious about what yours is, maybe take your zodiac sign or look up what month you were born figure out what zodiac sign it is associated with, and then maybe do a Google search for the constellation for that sign and see what yours looks like. With that said, everybody, that was all we needed to complete for our book on constellations today. So once again, thank you for joining us, and indeed for joining us for all of our science read-alouds for the year. This was the last one. I appreciate you being able to follow along with me with them throughout our 5th grade year. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your year. Take care. Goodbye.